Get started. Okay, thank you so much, everybody, for coming out today. If you don't already know, my name is Jason. I run Local Color, a Baltimore podcast. It's a local podcast in the city. And today, I, along with my co-host, Rob Lee, who also runs a podcast in the city, were given a very special opportunity, a private tour of Repercussions, the art exhibit that is currently on display at the Eubie Blake Cultural Center, and this is the Cultural Center itself. I don't want to talk too much because at the end of the day, y'all aren't here for me or us, you're here for Rob and the things downstairs. Just a brief overview. Rob is a culture protector, curator. Oh, wait, no, yeah, Tom, Rob. My wife knows I confuse people's names a lot.
Congrats on that marriage recently.
Oh, thank you. Tom is a cultural protector. He was working at Creative Alliance. And above all things, he is a curator. He is somebody who goes out and finds the art that speaks to our soul. And I could introduce Rob, but I'm going to let him do it.
Well, thank you, sir. And thank you, Tom, for this opportunity to come here and speak with you fine folks and speak to you out there in camera land. So I'm Rob Lee from Truth in This Art. It's a interview series featuring artists, entrepreneurs, and tastemakers in and around Baltimore to really try to get down to really what's happening here with people that are driving the culture. And I think a lot of times it's misrepresented, so I thought let's do my part to show that we got a lot of cool individuals here. I see some folks who've been on who are out here. What's up, Kai? And Thomas as well, so this is especially a treat. So without much further ado, do you want to get to some questions? How you feeling?
You guys tell me. Look, I'm honored to that we got this collaboration going.
Yeah.
I was happy to show you guys the show. So however you go, this is your show. I'm here to relax.
Okay.
I'm here to talk. So whatever you guys want to do.
I mean, you're in a hot seat, so we got questions. So I guess I'll start off with this one question that'll show that I did a little research. So loosely, the Black aesthetic has been defined as a cultural ideology that developed in America alongside the Civil Rights Movement of the 1960s and promoted Black separatism in the arts. Larry Neal, who was credited for coining the term in 1968, but many Black aesthetic theorists don't agree on there's a real definition. My take is it's a living thing. There's no boundaries. Mm-hmm. From your vantage point, how do you describe and view the Black aesthetic?
Well, I mean, I think that that's sort of the purpose of having the show, sort of have the subtext of redefining the Black aesthetic, because, I think that the Black aesthetic is something that, like you're saying, I mean, it's as vast as our experiences. So, and I guess the reason I called the show Repercussions was because the original way I was thinking about it was the essentially what our lives are like post-colonialism.
Sure.
And so these are sort of the repercussions of that, the way in which we create, the way in which we understand history, the way in which we research history, the way we talk about it, the way we express it to others. So I guess going back to your question, I mean, if in the show there are 14 artists, each of them with a unique style, a unique material that they're using, a unique point of view. They each have their own, they come with their own experiences, they come with their own lineages and histories, and the way they connect with the outside world, the way they connect with their families, the way they connect with the environments in which they were brought up in is all different. So I think that especially in the original way that the Black aesthetic was defined, a lot of people wanted to relate it to the Black struggle or the struggle of the civil rights movement at the time, which I think now is sort of inherent or present in each of the artists' work in one way or the other. But I think more and more it's becoming abstract, if you will. Because I think for all of us now, it's important to be woke in one way or another. And that doesn't mean that any negative connotation that anyone has with that word, it doesn't necessarily have to be that, but it's really just that you are aware of what is going on and the cause and effect. And so I think the Black aesthetic now is really just channeling that consciousness into your work. So it's not just one thing, it's very vast. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you for sharing.
Can you describe the difference between abstract art and surreal art? Because I think both art styles are very unorthodox and hard to make sense of. So to like the layman, because you're a curator, so you're definitely the expert, how would you describe the difference between the two art styles?
I wouldn't even call myself an expert.
No more than me. So.
No, I mean, I think the way that I would consider the differences, whether it's surrealism, whether that's impressionism, or anything before we get to what was known as abstract work, is really just the way in which the work is created, the way in which the figures are displayed in the work. So like so abstract work, a lot of people might think that abstract work is just probably like Jackson Pollock is probably what people would think of. But you can also think about Ramir Bearden as abstract work, Basquiat as abstract work. Really just these, there's figurative work, or there's figurative elements there can be figurative elements in the work so I would still consider it abstract. But again, it's not. I think also the reason why we've moved into this sort of abstract and mixed media world, which is really a lot of the works in the show, is because just like all of our experiences are vast, the way in which we want to communicate that is vast as well. So sometimes you might want to use elements of abstract, or you might want to use elements of impressionism, where it's sort of where you can see certain figures that are there, but they might not be like photorealism, or just straight figurative, just like the piece behind us, that we would just consider that just a figurative work. But yes, I guess to answer your question, I think now in 2021 there's so much blurring of the lines, blurring of the genres. So which I guess that's sort of like that's not really an answer, but
I'll take it.
Okay, yeah, but it's a lot of mixing, I guess.
All right, as he does the handoff, it's like us going back and forth, like in like a rap thing or what have you, back and forth with the mic. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in naming this exhibition, Repercussions, I had to look up the definition. Repercussions are defined as the result after impact. I believe that the work here is emblematic of earlier artists, and you kind of touched on that bit. Yeah. Where do you see things going in terms of gallery representation of Black artists, curators, and even specifically to what's happening in the Baltimore art scene?
So I think that, to answer your question about the galleries first, is I think that a lot of artists are, a lot of the power now is in the artist's hands to a certain degree. A lot of artists now, we see a lot of artists, especially here, that they might do specific deals that aren't traditional. Yeah. So there might be a deal where there is a. Okay, let's my bad. Let's make sure we're getting it. No, for sure. But we want to. There are deals that are like time limit. So it'd be like, okay, we're gonna represent you for a year, or they say we're gonna represent you for this project. And then I think a lot of artists, especially now in negotiation, because the power is in a lot of artists' hands. If you're an artist and you're kind of popping, you're selling work, and you might, which is because there's so many more platforms, whether that's through Instagram or that's through Artsy or even Etsy, like a lot of these online platforms, and even TikTok. Now I think about it, a lot of people are selling work through TikTok. But because of that, you might not need or want any specific gallery representation the way that it has traditionally been done. Traditionally, they'll have, their galleries might only offer these like really exclusive deals where you can only show with them, or they have first dibs on all of your work. Yeah. And I think a lot of artists now, they're kind of like, no, I don't really want to do that. And if you do want to do it, it's fine. But I think what we're seeing now is a lot of artists are taking the power back, and they're like, okay, you know what? Let me work with this person for a year. Let me see how it goes, or let me give this gallery 10 of my pieces throughout the year, and then I'll keep and I'll do whatever I want with the other 10 or 20 or however much they're creating, or I'll work with them on a specific project. If it goes well, maybe we move forward. If not, then maybe we don't, which is something that hasn't traditionally been seen. But I think also when we talk about gallery representation, I think now a lot of galleries and even international galleries that may not have had any black artists on their roster, they might want a black artist now. Yeah. Because black art is hot right now. I don't know exactly what this is going to be called in the books when this sort of when we kind of see the end of this run. But from what I call it is essentially just like the like black figurative sort of movement, if that's what you want to call it. I don't know. But what we're seeing now is that a lot of people want black art because people want what's new, people want what's fresh, they want different perspectives, they want new stories, and they want things that people haven't seen before, and they want to be the first one to get it. So a lot of galleries are now adding black artists to their roster, and we also see a lot of galleries that have black artists kind of exploding, like we see, even here, Mertice, for example, her gallery, it's all black artists on there. And now, now more and more we see those artists, getting a lot of big looks and things like that. So I think from the gallery space, I'm thinking that we're going to see more and more. We're going to see more and more black artists represented by galleries and doing deals with galleries. What were the other two parts? That was like a two-part question, right?
So I guess to expound, and I think you kind of covered it, but even in it, with I think you really touched on the artists, but as far as representation amongst like black curators, and specifically in this local scene too.
Right. Yeah. To be honest, I think if you're a curator now, you're in like a pretty good position because there's so many transferable skills that you have as a curator. Being on the arts admin side is like, being good at the arts admin side is not easy, and so it's a very coveted skill set. Yeah. So we see a lot of curators, such as myself, even just being parts of many different projects. So I would say majority of what I do is pretty much outside of the gallery. So like spearheading acquisition projects that I've been a part of, or opening up a residency, or even here I'm the exhibitions committee co-chair. So it's more than just picking the exhibitions, but it's also working with local installers, or just like, and there are curators here in Baltimore that are opening up all these different spaces, especially here on Howard Street. So I think being able to handle budgets, being able to work on logistics, being able to run a space operationally, but also programmatically is a skill set that a lot of curators now have, because traditionally they've been asked to do so much. Curators outside of within the museum realm, but also outside of the museum realm. Curation, even in just the word, when we think about curating, essentially that's running things. Yeah. So if you have the ability to run things while also be creative and have an eye for the artists that are doing great things, and being able to critique and write and all these different things that curators are asked to do, that can take you many different places. So and I think Baltimore is full of curators. One is because we have there's a lot of curators that come out of the MICA program. They actually have a curatorial practice program, which is not normal. A lot of schools don't have that. So one, even in just having that in particular sort of separates Baltimore from a lot of other places. And so I think, yes, I think what we see a lot, when we see a lot of these projects popping up, especially, ones that I know are going on but haven't been announced yet, but when we see a lot of these projects going on, a lot of them are done by people with curatorial experience, because they've had to do so much throughout the time, and then throughout their time. And then to answer your last question about about the Baltimore art scene, I think we're going to see it expanding more and more. One reason is because because we're so close to other cities, and so now people are really looking at Baltimore and going like, yo, like, it's some cool stuff going on. And like, for example, there are galleries here that most of their collector base is actually in DC, or it's actually in New York. It doesn't necessarily have to be in Baltimore. So by proxy, you're bringing collectors, you're bringing people that are interested in art, you're bringing them to Baltimore. And so naturally, there might be more and more people involved in the scene. One of the really cool things that happened when we had the artist talk for this show was Charles Jean Pierre, or JP. He said that he was thanking me. He was like, thank you, Thomas, for bringing me, having me on the show. But he said that he also felt like he was not only being invited to a show, but being invited to a city. And I think that's really unique about the Baltimore scene. And personally, I'm from the DMV area, but so coming up here and being a part of it, one of the big things that I've been trying to do is to bring Baltimore artists to the other places that I'm connected with, and then vice versa, bringing them here. So the show downstairs, it's probably like 50-50 between Baltimore artists and DMV artists. But we had a dinner. We had a nice dinner after the show. We just had a nice dinner at the artist talk and stuff like that. And you see these artists that are from these different places, but everyone's connecting, everyone's networking. Be like, hey, I got this project going on, or I got that project going on. And so I think that a lot of people are going to be coming in and out of Baltimore, and Baltimore folks are going to be going in and out of these other places because it's important to expand, and it's important to bring that economy and that culture multiple places. I think for a lot of us here that are in these, like you're saying, tastemaker position, or even gatekeeper positions, I think it's going to be important for us to keep that energy when people who are, I guess, sort of new to the scene, or however you want to say that, when they come in, it's going to be important for us to to make sure that they're doing right by what's going on, because because Baltimore is it's cheap to live. It's you can easily buy property and things like that. That means it can be very easy for other people to come in and sort of push whatever they want to on it. So I think it's important for the folks here that have been invested in it to continue to continue to protect, everything that's going on. But overall, I think just that expansion is what's next for the scene as far as galleries, artists, projects, just all that in general.
Specifically talking about Repercussions and in the fact that the show is abstract black art, which is something that some people might not even think or know exists, physically as well as professionally, how did putting on this show and organizing this show challenge you as a curator?
That's a really good question. So I've been wanting to do this show for over a year. Not necessarily knowing what it was going to look like, but just having in my mind, I'm like, okay, there's going to be a black abstract show, or abstract and mixed media. I'll say abstract and mixed media. An abstract and mixed media show. And I just pretty much had the name and some artists that I had my eye on. I wanted to push myself as a curator, because that's not something that, this is the second show that I've done that is all abstract or mixed media. I did one at Creative Alliance called Organic Destruction, and that was a good experience on how exactly to sort of craft that sort of show. I felt like this show was really me kind of mastering it as far as, in comparison to the last show that I did like this. But it was important because there are, like we're saying before, the how we think about and understand blackness is so vast that sometimes you might not be able to have all these different ideas in a figurative show or something like that. There needs to be abstract art allows for so many different elements to be part of one single piece. It allows for a lot of nuance. And it allows for a lot of just questioning of how people are making. So Wale Ali, who has the pieces that are made from that, the puffy material that's used to fill in the cracks and stuff like that. A lot of people are amazed when they're like, "What? That's what he's using to create?" It's just so even just or even Soldano's piece, which is that middle piece in the second room, that is just a complete assemblage with the bricks and the trinkets and all the different types of dirts and seashells and stuff. And just the idea of seeing that as fine art is something that pushes a conversation, or sort of it creates this understanding that, okay, using these materials, using materials that you can literally find and source in your community, in your home, that can be considered fine art, and it can communicate the same sort of ideas that your typical painting could, or it can bring an aesthetic that just dazzles you. So it can bring forward the same elements of typical, more typical paintings and things like that. But just, but it brings those different elements. So that's why I think it's important.
So I want to get your thoughts on this. So art critique and art appreciation are subjective. What distinct hurdles do black abstract artists encounter that their white contemporaries don't? Could you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, I feel bad for a lot of black artists that because a lot of, especially when we're going through critiques, and I've heard of a lot of black artists that go through critiques, whether that's in school or just in other critique groups, and they'll say, when I brought my work, everyone was just silent. There's this, because the members of the of those panels or whatever normally don't have that same background, so they may not feel for some reason they may not feel comfortable commenting on it, or like they may not want to say the right thing, or they may not even give it a chance for an understanding, because their understanding of blackness might just be boxed in. But like, for example, I've done critiques at many of the schools around here and in different critique groups and stuff like that, and even if and that would normally have artists from many different backgrounds, different countries, ages, sexual orientations, like the entire spectrum of the human race. And in all of those critiques, I'm constantly asking questions, trying to draw comparisons, and just trying to get a better understanding of what exactly they were trying to communicate or create, or whatever the case is. And from there, then I can try to give meaningful feedback, stuff like that. But really, unfortunately, a lot of black artists don't necessarily get that. They get a lot of like lazy responses, sometimes offensive responses. And so, I mean, I think that's why it's important for things like this. So reference it again, the talk that we had earlier this week, and it was wonderful, because at the end, some of the artists got to ask each other questions, and then we went downstairs, and it was essentially like a small reception down there where I got to see the artists showing each other their work and them asking each other questions and giving feedback and stuff like that. And sometimes as a black artist, that's like the lengths that you have to go through when you should be getting it if you're in school or whatever. And I think that's something that it is unfortunate. But I think it's sort of like, I guess for us it can be like Montessori school, like you're learning from your contemporaries. Yeah, but does that answer the question?
No, I think it does. Yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha. Okay. So you touched on this a little bit in your previous responses, but I'd like to reframe or ask the question in a different way, because I think it could give a different response. Several prominent black abstract painters and artists have seen really monumental auction results, and people are really starting to make good money off of this art that people might not understand or feel like they can't comment on because they don't have those kinds of experiences. And we want to ask you, is that a result in changing tastes or growth in representation by those leading galleries?
That's a good question.
Well, that is a Rob question, so good job, Rob.
Personally, I think it's a culmination of a lot of different things kind of happening at the same time. I think, one, to reiterate, black art and black storytelling is hot right now, because it's new in the way that it's being valued by the dominant society, because there's always been black creatives and black people making this amazing work. That's one of the major, when I was first doing research for this show, I was thinking a lot about and learning a lot about Betty Saar and Faith Ringgold and Ramir Bearden and just like what they were doing in their time. So like it's always been there, but now, I would say this past Black History Month, I saw like the most black everything, from commercials to collaborations to like everything. And, a lot of that is because of the times and what's going on, and because there are so many prominent black people in our popular culture, and they're making it cool for black stories to be told, and also they are the people that have made it to a certain level, that have been able to gain the skill set to be able to maneuver within the dominant society, are using their time and money and resources to sort of reach back and bring other people up. I mean, that's how a lot of artists are getting their shot, or getting their whatever you want to say, is from other people that look like them, bringing them up. And so I think it's a lot of that happening at the same time. I mean, like, especially when Amy Sherald and Kehinde Wiley, painted the president. I mean, that was like big. Not only because they were like the black artists that painted the black presidents, but really because a lot of that, it put such a magnifying glass on what was already happening, that it helped to kick open the door. And I think a lot of us, because we may not have had certain opportunities, not only because of the way we look, but just because of we might not benefit from nepotism. We might not have access to certain resources and certain opportunities and things like that. We may not have had the chance to get to know this important person, or be in this show, or whatever the case is. But now we are a little bit more, and I think a lot of us have the mentality of like, hey, if I can just get a foot in the door, that's all I need, and then I'll break it open for, and so like I know that's my mentality, and I know that's a lot of other creatives and mentality. And so I think now a lot of us are getting that foot in the door, and I think a lot of people are taking advantage of it. So yes, I think it's all of that happening at the same time.
So I want to go back into talking about the actual exhibition. And so what was the thought and placement? And I go back to a conversation that you and I had when we did the interview for Bright. Mm-hmm. And we remarked upon that first piece. So I look at this one, and this setup here for Repercussions, and student, worker, and elder is the first piece. But from some points of view, you see Alegua, Ori, and Asha, it pops, and it's like right there as soon as you come in. And then waiting for a seat at the table kind of is that last piece. So what was the thinking in kind of organizing it in that way, and was it intentional?
So that in particular, like the design, you're talking about like the design of the show?
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of the designs come organically. A lot of the shows, I'll have the artist in mind. I'll go there, I'll see the pieces, and I'll just connect to it and be like, okay, I want this piece, and then from there, I sort of build the show from there. But I think overall, a lot of my curatorial style is there's no way to erase whiteness and what has been done to the African diaspora throughout the world. But I like for the shows here or just the shows I do in general, for the most part, to sort of reframe the narratives. And so, like, for example, the first piece, the piece that's right next to the title, the washerwomen. So like that piece could have been a completely different piece. So like when you think about that story of the washerwomen and them going on strike, it was because of the extremely low wages, the terrible conditions, and so the piece could have focused on that, but instead Antonio, the artist Antonio McAfee, he decided to draw strength from the piece and the courage that these women had to go on strike at that time. And so I guess to answer your question about like how the shows are designed, a lot of it is organic, but I think with my thought process that goes into choosing the pieces, a lot of times it just sort of falls into place. like especially with the Bright Show when we did our first interview, the same sort of thing happened where, I picked all the pieces because I thought that they all resonated with my idea for what I wanted to put in the show. And so then from there, the idea kind of just fell into place, or the design sort of just fell into place, where the first piece was about the museum guard and sort of the way that the inequity of the museum world when it comes to displaying black artists. And then you whip around the whole exhibition, and there's so much empowering work that you're seeing. You're seeing these like that huge piece by Ambrose, which is sort of like connecting to like spirituality, and you see the cowboy piece from Megan Lewis, which is bringing up these really really cool stories, and the quilts by Michael Booker and stuff like that. Then you get to the end of the show, and we have that piece from David Abada with the mouth missing, and we talked about the way that people might feel silenced or just sort of have that like downtrodden outlook on life, or it could be just an empowering contentment, and sort of like starting the show with a piece like the Museum Guard and ending it with a piece like David's. The design, the thought process behind that was really that, like, does this relate to the overall theme of the show? Like, are these pieces strong enough to start the show on an empowering piece and end the show with something that is going to leave you asking more questions? And I think that's what it did, having the last piece as that collage waiting for us at the table, because we all had a different perspective about what that is. Is it, do we want to sit at the table? Are we, like you're saying, are we being served up on the table? Is like, when I think about the design, I definitely want people to leave, if they decide to follow the show in that particular way. But I would definitely want people to leave asking more questions than what they came in with. So that was a long way of answering your question.
That's in depth, and it's like a post-credit scene.
So. We're down to the last question. Do you have any additional ones that you wanted to ask, or you feel good?
I feel good.
Okay, cool. So we'll ask the final question, and then we'll do the pluggables, so you can tell people like how to contact you and such. What do you hope the audience takes away from this exhibition, and for the future of art in Baltimore, in the United States, and in the world? What do you want to see in terms of representation of black art?
Well, before I answer that, can I ask a question from you guys? Can we, if the audience wants to ask any questions, can we have them ask questions?
Yeah, of course.
All right, cool. But so, to answer your question on what people leave with for the show, I want people to, for one, I want people to look at objects differently, and the way that we view fine art differently, because again, like, we have all of these crazy materials that are being used throughout this show, and they all mean something to all these artists. It either relates to where they've come from, their lineage, and also, like, their direct family members, or like even things going on within their own bodies. We see a spiritual connection. We see these connections to where you're born and where you've grown up and where you currently are, and a lot of the ways that we relate to that is through objects. There's a certain power that objects hold, and I think that this exhibition, all the artists that are here do a very good job of utilizing objects in that way. And so, one, I hope people walk away, like, maybe just thinking about the objects in their lives differently. But I also hope that on a spiritual level, people feel empowered when they leave the exhibition. Many of the pieces, there is there's a deep spiritual connection, and some of them that I think sort of speak to that are the two Wesley Clark pieces, the American flag and the stained glass piece. I think that people can, something deep in your soul might be touched when you see those and you think about the experience of people here in this country, as well as the very intimate relationship between a parent and a child, as well as all of the different shrine-like pieces that are in the show, whether that's like Lionel's piece of With All the Wood, or Lena's piece, the water spirit, or Desmond Beach's piece with all those different relics that are essentially used for as like a prayer, on like a prayer rug. I think that all of the works that are in this show definitely make you question things that you may not be able to see or understand. And so I hope that when people come and they view the show, that when they leave, they feel as if they've had some sort of spiritual connection to it. Because I think that's one of the things that really ties in a lot of the works in the show and what a lot of the artists are doing. And then there was a second part to that question.
It was more about like representation for Black art, but unless you have like more to say on it, I feel like you've answered it. Would you agree, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would just end with, as far as representation goes, I mean, I want people to be responsible with their power, with their influence, and the images that we put out. Meaning, like if you put out an image that could hurt people, or that's fine, but I want people to be able to explain that and give context to it, because I think that sometimes as Black artists we create just to create, and that's not a bad thing. But I think that especially if you're going to be putting things out to the public, and you're going to be representing yourself in that way, it's my hope that people will continue to speak about it in depth, because that also pushes the conversation forward. It is good to leave things up to interpretation, but sometimes it is just as powerful to thoroughly explain what you're thinking about, what you're researching, and why you're creating the images that you create. But other than that, yeah, I mean, I think everybody, many of us are feeling empowered right now. I feel like a lot of us are feeling like, we have the power to open up our own spaces, or to do our own projects, I feel like a lot of us feel kind of free to create in that way. And again, going back to what I was saying, I think that's that sort of empowering feeling, and that sort of freedom, I think, is really indicative to the spirit that I think a lot of us have, and like I said, I think that's coming through in a lot of the work. So I hope that continues.
Awesome. Anything else you want to add?
Question.
Cool.
Sure. We'll now open it up to the audience. Does anybody have any questions they would like to ask? Mostly Tom or me or Rob? No. You, sir.
Mm-hmm.
From the curator side, that's going to be social business and economy. How do we, as a group, be able to maintain a consistency? Because I know I saw a show on HBO, Black Art, Actions of Life. One of the things that they brought up, we represent maybe 2% of the mainstream that's out there. If we build, is it better to build our own community? Is it better to be able to move forward? Or is it better to not force our way to get acceptance, but hey, build it and they will come? Is it better to take that approach, or, I know it's stupid. We keep fighting to get accepted, for lack of words, like you said, by the mainstream. From your experience, which way would be the most practical way in order to grow our
Well, I think we have to do multiple things at the same time. So, like, I'm someone that I like to go to museums and colleges to see exhibitions, but also like to go to cultural centers such as Eubie Blake. So I think for one, I think it's important for all of us to keep the pressure on larger institutions to not only have representation within within the gallery walls, but also behind the scenes. Because, for example, when I was at Creative Alliance, I was the first black male or even just black person that they had as a curator at Creative Alliance, and almost instantly the programming began to change, because that's what I valued. I valued seeing more people that look like me, that I know are doing dope stuff, that are creating dope things, or just have a dope perspective in that space. And so when you have people of different backgrounds on the board, in curatorial positions, in programming positions, or even working the front desk, like things will begin to change. So I think that those of us that frequent these establishments, we need to keep the pressure on them and continue to complain when we don't see enough representation, and also push for, and then also us behind the scenes. If we're in these positions where we're saying, okay, I'm the only black person here, we should hopefully we'll feel empowered to say, to go to the other people that are, I guess, the higher ups, and say, hey, there need to be more people that look like me here. But at the same time, while that's happening, we do need to continue to build our own institutions and continue to support our own institutions. Like there's, in Baltimore, there aren't too many spots like Eubie Blake. And Eubie Blake is not a place where we're just handing out jobs and handing out checks, and a lot of what we do is volunteer based. So so if you're someone that is in a institution where they are handing out jobs and checks and stuff like that, you might feel nervous going to someone and saying, hey, I want there to be more people that look like me, because if you get fired, you might not be able to go somewhere else. So it is important for us to continue to support these institutions such as Eubie Blake, because then someone might say, hey, I shook things up here, I can no longer work there, can I get some help, that sort of thing. And then hopefully the community will be able to help in that way. Yeah, but I guess even deeper than that, it's just more important to build our own in general, so that, because again, people see what we're doing here and they follow suit. I can't tell you I've been on the exhibitions committee here for 2 years, and in that amount of time, we've had artists show here that are now in these national shows, that are now represented by galleries, that are they're going to using the work that they've done here to apply for grad school, apply for grants, apply for residencies, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're doing here is important, and it's a very important grassroots platform. So we need to continue to foster that and build it and expand upon it. Both at the same time.
Does anybody else have any questions for Tom or for me or Rob? No questions? Okay. So we're going to close this out with just the good old pluggables, where you can find and contact us, and where you can listen to the things that we say. So we'll start with you, Rob. How can people contact you, and how can they listen to your podcast?
Smoke signals. I'm available on all of the podcast platforms. That's Truth in This Art, and it's Truth in This Art on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Podcasts go up pretty regularly. Just dropped the interview that I did with David. So David Ibarra. So that's
to hear it.
pretty much it. But check me out in those places, and it's 140 episodes on there. So there's a lot of interesting conversations with people who are doing really cool stuff in the scene.
Cool. And then Tom, we'll go to you.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram, thomasjames.dc, or you can go to my website, thomasjamesdc.com.
And for me, my podcast is called Local Color, a Baltimore podcast. People just call it Local Color. Find it on localcolorpodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and I'm at Local Color Podcast on Instagram, which is the main social media handle that I use. That is it for us. Thank you so much for joining us for this panel discussion, and we hope that when you go back downstairs to look at the pieces of art, you'll look at them with a different perspective than when you came in, and please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.